How many of you, despite your very best efforts, you went to extraordinary preparation? You gave it your all, and you found that you missed the mark despite all of your extraordinary efforts. Anybody ever had that experience? How many of you have ever had the experience where you really gave it your all, but you blew it badly, as it turned out? Anybody? It's probably just me that's only had that experience. Sometimes life is that way. I had just begun my local church ministry as a senior minister at a church that had had a proud history, and I wanted to do my very best. One week after delivering a message, someone approached me and said, "You hit it out of the park." And I decided that's what I wanted to hear on a regular basis. Put all this effort in, I wanted to hit it out of the park. So that week, I prepared twice as long. I worked twice as hard. And when I stepped out to give a message, I could feel my face turning red. I could feel my ears turning red. I couldn't remember for the life of me what it was that I had prepared to say. I fumbled through 10, 12 minutes or so, and in some ways was wiser then than I can be now and knew just to stop. And afterwards, the same person who came to me and said the week before, "You hit it out of the park," came and said, "This week you just decided to bunt, didn't you?" We've all had that experience, haven't we? Some of us not that long ago, maybe an hour or so ago at the chapel service. Hopefully this one will go better. What is the internal dialogue after we've blown it badly? Whose voice do we hear? What words do we hear? What's the tone of the voice that we hear when after we've given it our all and we come up short? Do we berate ourselves? Are we angry at ourselves? Do we lecture ourselves? What's that internal voice sound like? We're fortunate for the next 5 weeks we're going to be walking through James, and James is instructive in so many ways. James is unique. It's considered a homily, a sermon, as well as a letter. There are a number of instructive insights. Out of the 108 verses, there are 59 imperatives. Every other verse has an insight, an instruction, an imperative, what it means to live a life of faith. It's unique in that James focuses on intentional community. It's not restricted to households. It's directed at the church universal. It's ecumenical in nature. We are not merely individuals. We are persons in community. What affects one of us directly affects all of us indirectly. That is a reality that the mystics throughout the ages have come to understand and appreciate. We really are interconnected. We are one body with many parts, distinct but inseparable. It's important for me to become more fully who I am called to be. Because if I don't become more fully who I'm called to be, then that can diminish the community of which we are called to be a part. We are responsible to, with, and for one another. We are our brothers and sisters' keepers. The book of James is unique in that there is no emphasis on hierarchy, on status, on rank. Who's more important? Who's less important? Who's above? Who's below? Who's first? There's a recognition that we are all children of God and all have infinite worth, and we are called to see one another as God sees us, to see ourselves as God sees us. Every good and perfect gift comes from God, the writer of James instructed us this morning. And out of God's own purpose, God has gifted us. And part of God's gift to us is to be a part of that purpose. We see this contrast in James. There's evil that is prevalent. When James penned this homily, evil seems to prevail. And yet we live in a world of ambiguity. We see a world of good, and we see a world where there are deficits of goodness. We look within ourselves, and we see our condition. And yet James encourages us to be hearers of the word, doers of the word, quick to listen, slow to speak, slow to become angry. How many of you need a little help in that department? I was going into a meeting this past week, and I said to a friend and coworker, today I'm going to practice listening more and speaking less. And by the time we left that meeting, I looked at him and said, I failed my goal for the day. It takes practice, doesn't it? We hear, we do, we fail. We hear, we do, we get better. We hear, we do, we fail again. But we're called to persevere. I was once having a discussion with someone about the difference between stubbornness and perseverance. Stubbornness is when we keep doing something God never called us to do in the first place. That's a liberating message for someone this morning. Perseverance is when we keep going because we've heard and we believe and we keep practicing and we keep practicing because we believe the one who implanted the truth in us. That despite our condition, God's truth about us and about God's world and all who inhabit it, we've come to believe. And through our practice, we've come to trust. And the more we trust, through practice, we begin to actually know. Quick to listen, slow to speak, slow to become angry. Studies have been done on The athletes who excel at the very top of their game. Those who are ranked in the top 5 compared to those who are ranked in the top 20 to 25. What is the difference? Is it their diet? No. Is it their devotion? No. Is it the hours of training? No, they're all pretty similar across those criteria. It's the inner dialogue that they have with themselves. Every good and perfect gift comes from above. Every good and perfect gift comes from God. God says, "It is so, and it is good." God has given us the gift to be life-giving with our words or life-diminishing with our words. It begins with believing in how God sees us, all of us, regardless of what we may be presenting in any given moment. We are called to be a first fruits. There is a word, a truth, a reality that has been placed within us. And we know that love will ultimately prevail, despite at times all evidence to the contrary. A world where everyone is viewed as the child of God that everyone is. We're called to be hearers and doers, practitioners of this way, taught, embodied, walked by Jesus. Sounds like a platitude, doesn't it? All we need is love. Love is the most powerful force in the universe. Love has the power to transform us if we would just believe it. What has conditioned us that there would be any sense or impulse that love is not up for the task? As a young person, I could be pretty reckless. And for whatever reason, the reason teenage boys do what they do, and I don't know why, I did some of the things I did, and some of my friends like me. Shortly after I turned 16, for the fun of it, if I had friends with me, I would cut through my neighbor's yard to get to my driveway. I know. Silly doesn't quite cover it, does it? I didn't know my neighbor knew until one day we happened to be going to our mailboxes at the same time. And he started toward me. And then I had a sense that he might know. And I couldn't quite read the expression in his face. When he approached me, he said, "I know you've been driving through the yard. It may not seem like much to you, but I work pretty hard on it, trying to contribute to the neighborhood. If you would, please, don't drive through my yard." How much more effective was that than if he had lit into me? I walked away rightly ashamed of myself. There's a line in a movie that I often recall. Sometimes our poor self-esteem is just good common sense. But how we speak to ourselves and to other people matters. God has given us the capacity to employ words that are life-giving or life-diminishing. The call to ministry is one that is thrilling. I'm so very grateful for it. Indeed, I am. I am so grateful that I get to do what I do. By nature, ministry is transient. We never know how long we're going to be called to a particular place. So ministers are often in the position of becoming familiar with new communities. We had learned through prior mistakes that you don't necessarily buy a home as soon as you move into a town you're unfamiliar with. You rent to start with. That was a lesson I had to learn the hard way. We moved into this community, had no idea who our neighbors would be. As it turned out, we had a neighbor on one side who immediately was friendly, gave us the code to their garage, gave us a key to their house, welcomed us to the neighborhood. On the other side, we were neighbors with people who became our project to get them to smile at us at least once. See them in the mornings. Good morning. Hi. Valerie happened to come home one day on a day when it was the recycling day and found the neighbors who wouldn't smile or speak to us. Had an adult son who was moving out, and they were stuffing our recycling with things that weren't supposed to be recycled. Valerie didn't mind them if we had space in our recycling bin if they wanted, but not things that can't be recycled. So she said, you can't recycle that. The adult son and his father began to speak to Valerie using words that no human being should be spoken to in that way. My daughters were in the driveway as well. And they even spoke to one of my daughters that way. Valerie called me. I could hear it in her voice. I was about 45 minutes away before I could get home. And there were a number of responses that were going through my mind. Have you ever been there? What am I going to say? How am I going to handle this? Or if you've handled it poorly before, thought, I should have said this. I wish I had really zinged them. Boy, if I'd had it to think, I would have said this next time. I know I'm the only one who ever does that. I know you wouldn't do that. By the time I arrived, they were gone. They happened to be gone for 24 hours. And I happened to be in the driveway when they returned. And when they returned, of all the things that had gone through my mind that I was going to say, these were the words that came out of my mouth. How can we be better neighbors? And I thanked God that that's what came out of my mouth. Like all of us, I am a project. God is not done with me yet. My prayer for us is that we will look into the mirror who reveals who we really are. We're not there yet. We believe what God has to say about us. We are children of God. That is who we are. We hear, we do, we fail, we hear, we do, we succeed, we hear, we fail, we succeed, and we continue to persevere. And in so doing, our lives, this world is transformed into the kingdom, the community of God on earth as it is in heaven. May we be quick to listen, slow to speak. When we speak, may they be life-giving words. When we're angry, let's pause. Let's not give vent to that which is life-diminishing. That's my prayer for you. That's my prayer for me. That's my prayer for all of God's children. Amen.